So people have been asking me, will I shave? Will I not shave? I think I've found a solution that will make everybody happy. Hello, everybody. In this episode of a new video on my channel, I asked you, what are your fantasy hot takes here on YouTube? What are your opinions that might be controversial? And I promise to respond to the most controversial ones in a video here. And I will begin doing so now. Brought to you in 4K for the first time on the channel. That's right, the guy who accidentally uploaded a lot of his videos at 720p will now officially be in 4K, because I felt like that was necessary for this channel and this video especially right now, for some reason. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into your fantasy hot takes, and I will let you know whether or not I agree or disagree with them right now. George R.R. Martin's writing style is way more digestible than people make it out to be. There was a consistent thread in this comments section here on this post I made where people were talking about writing styles and their digestibility. And to almost all of them, I have to say it's entirely subjective and up to the reader to decide what's hard for them. The general trend is people tend to find George R.R. Martin's writing style a bit tricky to get through, it seems. A lot of people do complain about that. I don't necessarily agree. I think his writing style is a bit more digestible than a lot of people claim, in my opinion. But I've also pushed through a lot of his books, and I remember it being harder for me when I was first getting started. So I think really what the biggest issue is here is a lot of people get maybe halfway through a Game of Thrones, the first book in A Song of Ice and Fire, and quit, where you kind of have to readjust your mindset, similar to Tolkien, where almost everyone who pushes through Fellowship can then go through the rest fine. It's just a matter of shifting your brain and getting to the end. But I think there you have a point where it is not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be, especially because a lot of people who haven't really read fantasy are picking up these books for the first time and aren't used to this at all. So I think you're kind of right, but a bit wrong as well, where the people who are picking it up are legitimately having this harder time, and you can't entirely discredit that. Star Wars is a victim of its own success. You're absolutely right, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, I haven't hated everything Star Wars since the original trilogy. There have been great additions to Star Wars since then, but it absolutely should have, in my opinion, died with the original trilogy in terms of new additions, and from there it just would have been remembered as this flawless, not flawless, but incredible trilogy that people always look back to fondly. Now, it's really uncertain what its future will bring. We don't know if Star Wars will be beaten into the death or if it's going to continue on for a century and continue to reach commercial success. It certainly is not having the commercial success a lot of people predicted for it now, with a couple of movies not doing as hot. But hey, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, and I'm sure a lot of people are really happy to see new Star Wars content coming out consistently, so I'm not going to fight you. Fantasy books, especially series, need more illustrations. Pictures aren't just for kids' books. 100% you're right. More illustrations, more maps. They're art, they're beautiful, and they do nothing but enhance the story being told, and I enjoy them always as long as they're well done. Just a few opinions, I'm only gonna go with one of yours. Buying multiple copies of the same book is pointless. Completely disagree. If we're talking same book but different editions, some people like buying, well, this is my trash paperback that I can just read through, and this is the nice hardcover I put on my shelf and I'm really proud of and I show people. And I understand that completely, especially if you have extra cash to burn through, go right ahead. It's better than a lot of hobbies people have in terms of like monetary expenditure. So I don't think it's pointless, but if you're saying it's pointless to have the exact same copy of the exact same book, the exact same edition, no autograph, no difference whatsoever, yeah, you have a little bit of a side there. Though I would say I know people who have multiple copies of Harry Potter series just because they lend out the one they don't care about, their not nice one, to whoever, and they're the same edition. It's just this one stays nice in the shelf, while this one I'll give to people when they ask to borrow it. Fantasy readers and writers don't read outside of their genre enough. A lot of fantasy is starting to read the same to me. I was of this opinion too, until recently. Recently, I think the genre has shaken up a lot, especially in these last couple years. We are seeing different cultures, different time periods, different themes, different plot lines than the fantasy genre has ever seen emerge in popularity. So I think this is changing, but it still needs to change more, and it's not enough. So I actually do largely agree with you, but I think that this is being fixed right now, currently. And if you want to find things that are kind of not feeling as stale to you in the fantasy genre, highly recommend you pick out things that have come out in the last couple of years, because I think the last couple of years has really showcased, well, maybe not the greatest fantasy of all time, certainly the greatest divergence for fantasy, in my opinion, of all time. There is no such thing as required reading to join a genre community. For example, you are by no means obligated to read The Lord of the Rings, A Song of Ice and Fire, The Wheel of Time, The Name of the Wind, and one Sanderson series to join in conversation. Some would argue The Gentleman Bastards is also required reading. They are all good recommendations, but there should be no such thing as required reading. We should all be able to read whatever we want, when we want. Completely agree. I've basically echoed this same point on my channel, but if you want to have certain conversations, there is required reading. If you want to speak on the development and the history and the changes that have happened throughout fantasy's history, you need to be well read in Tolkien. You need to be well read in a few other keystone moments in fantasy. So while I think absolutely everyone's welcome, you're not required to read anything for the genre, I'm also going to say that there is a bit of snobbery that is earned when it comes to certain conversations, because I don't think people should speak on things they don't necessarily know a lot about. So I agree, but remember there is certain things that do require context. So yes, caveat. Characters are more important than plot. The plot must fit the characters, not the other way around. World-building fight scenes or magic systems will not make up for the connection we gain from experiencing the characters and their struggles. Those additional things should be used as tools, not the core of the novel. I'm looking at you, Brandon Sanderson. Interesting. I agree with your point, but I don't agree with you saying Brandon Sanderson, because I think his characters are very well developed, very well realized. I think earlier in his career, he might have struggled with this a bit more. Actually, I think he did struggle with this earlier in his career, but what we've seen from him recently, he's solved this problem as an author, I believe. Of course, this is subjective, and different characters will resonate with different people. I think Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher is one of the most deep and interesting characters I've read in fantasy in a long time. I've heard other people whose opinions I respect say he's boring. So I'm not going to say you're wrong. I disagree about who you're targeting, but I agree with your overall point. Character is key, absolutely. And I'm actually going to add on top of this that relationship is equally as important as developing your individual characters. Develop them and give them relationships. Without that, you're missing a key part of your story. We are privileged to read an author's creative output, and the author has no obligation to their fans to pump book outs quickly for them. In fact, should an author decide not to finish a series, they would be perfectly justified in doing so. Yes, but I 100% agree with this. But if the author has said they will finish and they have given deadlines to their fans and not met them, I still think that's fine. I do. I honestly don't think you should pressure them then still. But not finishing at that point is kind of a jerk move, because you've promised people you will and suddenly you're pulling it out. That I don't like as much, but in general, I completely agree. Don't pressure artists to get things out on time. Don't pressure them to say, hey, you said it'd be done now, because this is art and you can't just put a deadline on creativity. Ever. Eragon plus sequels was a young preteen's greatest possible entry to fantasy. I will say it was really, really good for a young author's entry, but greatest possible completely ignores the fact that we could have a Mozart level in terms of just like savant fantasy writer come in and just blow us all out of the water with their entries. So I'm not going to say greatest possible, but I agree that it's way better than people give it credit for when keeping in mind the context of the author's age and development at that time. Hot take: Frodo sucks as a character. Depends how you mean this. As a character, he's well developed and we understand him, so I think he's great, but his actions kind of suck, and the movie amplifies those. A lot of people, after watching the movies, have an even worse take on Frodo than when they just read the books. You have to remember the corruption he's going through, everything weighing on his mind. I think you're right and wrong where we're meant to think he kind of sucks, because he does fail. That's Frodo's arc. He is a failure as a protagonist, and it's Sam that saves the day. So yes, but I think he does that arc beautifully, and I love him as a character for that, but he does suck. Epic fantasy is better in audiobook form than written form. Depends on the narrator. There's too many variables here for me to say yes or no, but if this is your general taste, no one can tell you you're wrong. Tolkien's writing style is easier to read than Jordan's writing style. When you have people saying Tolkien's writing style, you're often talking about very different things, because if you're saying from Fellowship to Return of the King, is it physically easier to read that than the 14 or 15 Wheel of Time books? Probably yes. If suddenly introduced Silmarillion into the situation, and we take into account modern fantasy writing styles and how jarring it can be for people to jump into Tolkien, that really shifts the debate to the other side. But this is why I really struggled at that point in the Versus video, because I don't think there's a right answer. I gave my thoughts on it, but I can see both. One is an incredibly high word count, while another is basically having to relearn how to read a voice of an author. So it's really tricky, and I'm not going to blame anyone for thinking either way. Witcher books are overrated, just a rehash of monster stories and fairy tales. Maybe worse is how it's structured to be action scenes, either followed by or precipitated by pontification and moralizing about whatever point the author wanted to make at the given moment. I have only read the first 2 books, but couldn't continue. That's fine. That's a great take, and I'm not going to yell at you or say you're completely wrong. What I will counter with, though, is a lot of people really love this stylization from Witcher because it is so stylized and it feels so different than a lot of the typical structures and plotting we get from fantasy as a wider whole of genre. We have a lot of problems right now where a lot of fantasy reads like a lot of other fantasy, but I can get how someone can read it and find it more formulaic in its structure and just say it's rehashing monsters. So again, like, this is a book series with an opinion on it. Everyone's going to be subjective, but I will push back in saying that Witcher gains a lot of points from a lot of readers in terms of originality, depth of character, and the actual execution of those action scenes is often wonderful. So this has been our hot takes video. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, if we should do more of them in the future. I hope everyone's happy with the video, my takes. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I think I found a compromise on the shave don't shave thing in the comments section that everyone should like. So this is the new way you will be seeing me in 4K. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace. And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high tier Patreons. Sworn of the Dragon, Ben, and Azufe. I hope I said that right. Thank you guys so much, and I appreciate all the birthday wishes over the weekend. Everybody, it meant a lot. Have a good one, y'all.